Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agri. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. Today we're going to be talking to Stephanie Berkeley from the Farm Safety Foundation and Alex Phillimore from the Farming Community Network. Farming can be a challenging industry to work in, whether you are a farmer, grower or farm worker, or have a role in the ancillary industry. Mental health, we know, can affect any of us or those around us at any time. But what are some of the specific challenges and what can we do that can make a difference? And so to start us off, Stephanie, perhaps I can ask you first, where are we at with regards to mental health in our industry?
I think where we're at now is that the industry, which 10 years ago when we weren't even created, weren't talking about mental health in the industry. They weren't talking about farm safety either, if we're going to be very honest. But now, 10 years down the line, farmers are actually aware of the issue of mental health. They're aware of their own mental health, and actually they're becoming aware of the mental health of other people that they're living with and they're working with. So from one perspective, it can be a positive thing that this is something they're acknowledging is a contribution to the industry. But on the other side, we know from our research that 95% of young farmers believe that poor mental health is one of the biggest hidden dangers facing the industry. So it's a good thing and it's a bad thing in one way. So that's pretty much where we are at the moment.
And Alex, from your perspective from the Farming Community Network, do you feel that our awareness of mental health and the level of mental health is improving in our industry?
Well, I would say that we're certainly having more conversations, open conversations around the topic. I think it's hard to gauge if mental health across the industry is improving or declining or is staying at the same as it has been. But I would say that we're more likely to be having those conversations. I've been very encouraged in recent years that, for example, since I've been with the Farming Community Network, which is about 4 years now, when I first joined, there was perhaps a reluctance for people to go over to a charity stand at a show. They would see a charity stand and they would turn around and walk in the other direction. Now people are much more willing to come over and have an open conversation with us. I have also been very, very encouraged by the number of organisations across the sector that are actively inviting organisations such as Yellow Wellers or the Farming Community Network or others to go in and give talks or training on mental health. And I see so much buy-in from the sector and so much buy-in from the farming community on that. I've been in training sessions, I've delivered training sessions, and one thing that always makes me laugh, but I think it's a good thing, is you get a different selection of people in these training sessions, and there's always one person who they sit down and their arms are folded and they're like, I'm not going to engage in this session at all. And by the end of that training session, that's usually the most vocal person in that room. So people are opening up in their own ways and engaging with the topic, which I do think is very encouraging.
And Stephanie, as Alex is saying there, that willingness to have the conversation must be a good thing, mustn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And as Alex said, and it made me laugh actually, because I was in Wales and one farmer came up at the end of the session that I was delivering and said, you were a bit sneaky with how you sort of framed that, because if you told me this was about mental health, I wouldn't have come, but I'm really glad I did. And I think that is it. It's normalizing those conversations. It's busting those myths that people have in and around the subject, because people think the words mental health and they think poor mental health. That's where they go to immediately. But mental health is something we all have. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, and it's about ourselves and understanding, same as we do with our physical health, of when it actually dips and what causes that and what we can do about it. And that's purely what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to the stage that we're not at crisis situations, and that we're starting to relieve some of the pressures that there are on organisations like Farming Community Network, who have that helpline, who are there to hold the hand of somebody that needs it, that is struggling. So we're trying to ease the pressure off them.
And when our mental health is not in such a good place, what does that look like? How do we notice it?
It doesn't look the same in everybody. It looks different. For one person, it can be a lack of concentration, not being able to sleep, not eating, isolating themselves from people that probably know them well enough because they're not comfortable or they don't understand what's happening to them, not finding joy in the things that they normally would. But for others, there could be a case of masking it so that they don't want people to know. So it's almost like a false euphoria. They're spending more time, they're more ebullient than they normally are. They're drinking more, it doesn't look the same in everybody. So it's important that you understand your own signs and symptoms of when your own mental health might dip, and what you can do and the positive coping mechanisms that you can use to deal with it.
And Alex, when our mental health isn't in such a good place, what is the impact of that on our life around us, on our workplace?
Yeah, I think you can get stuck in a bit of a rut, and it can be difficult to view the world as more than just the farm. I think a lot of people, because they spend so much time on farm and the farm becomes their life, it can be difficult to kind of take a step back and realize that there is a wider world out there. And also, I think if you're in that state of poor mental health, you can start viewing everything that comes your way as a negative, and so you sort of get into that negative thinking. And I do think, for example, social media can impact on that as well, because I think, if you see a lot of negativity on social media, it kind of trains you to have a negative view on everything, and also to react to everything in a very, very extreme way. I think it's that inability or that difficulty to judge life positively. A lot of people get themselves into that state.
And Stephanie, in our industry, there is a lot of talk about loneliness and isolation. But what's the difference? What do they mean?
I think in farming, if we talk about that specifically, because everybody can isolate themselves in some way, shape or form, but actually, that whole you can be lonely in a room full of people is true. But you imagine the average farmer works 14, 16 hours a day, often on their own with not another person, not another human being to see or speak to. So if you're in an office environment, you're making yourself a cup of tea, or you're at the photocopier, you'll have a conversation with somebody. Farmers don't have that. They're out very early in the morning, working away. So something that could be quite a small thing at the start of the day that may be troublesome, might be something they're a little bit anxious about, with nobody else to sort of mull that over with or even talk about, then that can become something also almost like snowball and become something really quite large at the end of the day. They'll go home. They don't want to worry their family because, family's got their own dynamic and they don't want to concern them. So they keep it to themselves. And I think one massive thing with farmers is that actually they can often, there's a massive sense of pride saying you're a third, fourth generation farmer. So you actually don't want to be the one where if you have issues, whatever they be, that you don't want the farm to fail on your watch. So often when they do reach out for help to somebody like FCN or to somebody like RBI, they will actually be quite far down the line because they don't want to worry these people. And that's the difference in terms of rural isolation. That happens in farming and people understand that. But actually loneliness is a very different thing, because you can take that isolation and do that yourself and isolate yourself from people. And that is usually one of the signs and symptoms of somebody that might be struggling with their mental health, is actually keeping away from the people that they know best, that may see through it because they feel uncomfortable how they feel, or they don't understand themselves what they're going through. And they don't want to start having to explain a feeling or a sensation that they're not really sure what it is.
Thanks, Stephanie. And I know that you're really passionate about helping to improve farm health and safety as well. How does our mental health, when it is at a low ebb, get in the way of farm health and safety?
Absolutely. I mean, some of the conditions and some of the symptoms that somebody may be experiencing as a result of poor mental health could be that lack of sleep. That could be lack of concentration, brain fog, all of those things, burnout. Now, you think about that when you're getting behind the wheel of a tractor, or you're dealing with machinery, or you're dealing with livestock. If you're slightly a bit more aggressive with animals sense that, and that is not good in terms of, handling. But if you're actually behind the wheel of a tractor and you're not in the right headspace, you're more dangerous than that particular machine is, or that particular vehicle. So it can have a massive consequence on your ability to farm safely. And by the way, we did a lot of research into this. We did our research last year in 450 farmers under 40 and 450 farmers over 40 in September. We did a Warwick Edinburgh mental wellbeing scale on those, so we could see the levels of mental wellbeing in those industries and in those age groups. Now, when we looked at the farmers that registered lower levels of mental wellbeing, we were able to go back and look at the questions that they had answered around farm safety and risk taking. And actually, those with lower levels of mental wellbeing were less likely to take steps to keep themselves safe, which meant wearing a helmet on a quad bike, wearing PPE. They were more likely to admit to taking risks. They were less likely to think of the consequences of that risk. And worst of all, they were less likely to think that it is their personal responsibility to farm safely. It was somebody else's. So those could see that there's actually a direct link between farm safety and mental health.
We are donating £1 for every download of this podcast to support the ongoing tribute to Leonard Eden, 1999 to 2022. Visit leneden.muchloved.com to make a separate donation, or keep informed of events to support mental health awareness for the rural community. Alex, from your perspective, how does mental health affect different age groups in farming?
I think that there is a difference. I mean, I'm very encouraged that young farmers clubs, agricultural colleges, universities are really leading the way in terms of supporting the mental health of students and young people in this industry. What I would say that I've noticed is, particularly with some of the training sessions that FCN's delivered, the audience actually usually is of the older generation, and they're actually often very, very engaged with this topic. So I don't want to say that perhaps there is that disconnect. On the other hand, I was at an agricultural show late last year, and I was talking to a lad who was about 19 or 20, and I said to him, do you talk openly about your mental health? Do you talk about how you're feeling? Would you open up on your family farm? And this lad said to me, I would, but when I say that to my dad, he calls me a snowflake. He tells me to get over it. He tells me to get back to work. So therefore, that's made him now not open up, even though he feels like he should. He doesn't, because he's not validated by his family. So that's just one example of where I think there's still perhaps that resistance in some cases, certainly not in all cases. But I still think there is some of that generational difference in some instances.
And so what I'm hearing from Alex there is that we've all got a responsibility to talk openly and to be able to listen to anyone else in the industry. Stephanie, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, and I think it's the case of actually making, and you said it, every single one of us has a role to play in this, in changing the attitudes to talking about mental health, but also we also can do something about it. We don't need to all be experts. It's about caring and actually genuinely caring. So if you notice somebody that you're concerned about, or you're concerned about their behaviors, or you may be worried that they are struggling, you may not be the right person, and you may not feel right about actually having that conversation, but don't ignore it and hope somebody else notices it. Pass it on to somebody that actually might want to talk to them and maybe feel a bit more comfortable. And actually that can be done in passing conversations. I saw Tony last week. He's not his usual self. Is everything okay with him? That will start the cogs wheeling in somebody's head going, I wonder, is he okay? And maybe that person is the right person to have that conversation if you're not. And I think that is why we're so encouraged by everybody that we're working with at the minute, that as Alex said, we're delivering a lot of training for organizations who have people down the farm lane, who have contacts, whether they're vets, whether they're delivery organizations, whether they're actually retailers, somebody that contributes to, our sector. There are a lot of people who want to know, why is everybody talking about it? What's it all about? What does it look like? And really importantly, who can help these people? Who can help somebody that might be struggling? And that's the one thing we're very lucky in agriculture. We have an absolute wealth of organizations out there that can support and can offer that, held hand, because we know rural social care isn't great, and I know they're a lot less responsive than urban areas in terms of counselling and getting referrals, from the NHS point of view. So who is there to help that person while they're waiting for a referral? Is there access to counselling? Is there access to mentoring? Alex's team have their 400 or so, mentors right across the country that can come from a farming background, that know exactly what these people and can empathize properly with somebody that might be struggling and why they might be struggling, and don't judge. And that's the most important thing. They'll listen and they won't judge.
And Alex, can you share a little bit more about what you do at the Farming Community Network, and how and where can people go to when they want to speak to somebody and have concerns?
Yeah, so as Steph said, we're very lucky in our sector that there's no shortage of support charities and organisations out there. I think where the knowledge gap perhaps is being aware of the support that is available. We talk to a lot of farmers that are familiar with, let's say, the Farming Community Network, but then we'll also talk to farmers who've never heard of us. So we need to make sure that everyone within our sector understands that this support is available. What I would say from FCN's perspective as well is we do have about 400 volunteers working across England and Wales, providing all sorts of support. Sometimes it's that listening ear. We often describe it as walking with. So we walk with people through difficult times, periods of change. We help them try and find a positive way forward, whatever the issue might be. Could be something personal, could be business related. The cases we deal with are often very, very complex, and there's usually elements of both. So it's usually there's financial issues in the business. There might be family relationship challenges. There's usually a mental health component. There might be animal disease. The list goes on and on. Another point I'd just like to mention as well is that we aren't precious about who people within the farm community talk to. We just want to make sure that people reach out. So whether it's FCN, whether it's RABI, whether it's You Are Not Alone, whether it's We Are Farming Minds, all these excellent charities that are out there providing support for people. Doesn't matter who you reach out to, it's just do talk, do reach out to someone, because there is that support available.
Thanks, Alex. And of course, not forgetting that if you work for a company, you may well have access to employee assistance programs if you need to speak to somebody or seek some help. But of course, Stephanie, everyone in our industry is affected by these challenges, aren't they?
Absolutely. When we talk about agriculture, it's not just farmers. It's not. It's anybody whose work is allied to the agricultural industry, because they're all impacted. So a farmer, let's be honest, we've had the worst 18 months of rain since 1836, so that is having a massive effect on the industry. And we talked about that for the last couple of months. But moving on from that, the consequences of that will be felt at harvest time. It will be felt when they could take that harvest to actually the market. It will also be affecting consumers.
And so as we bring this podcast to a close, as we always do, we'd like to ask, what would be your top tips? What would you like listeners to take away? Alex?
Practical tips, I would say, as we've already said, talk. I think be good to yourself. I really do think it's just about making sure that you are actually putting yourself first. Sometimes there's a lot of altruism in farming and putting, livestock and, family, etc. before yourself. But I think it's okay sometimes to just put yourself as number one. Empathize with others and recognize that what you're seeing from someone is very rarely the full story. It's just the tip of the iceberg, and a lot of people might be going through things that you don't necessarily know. So just in general, be good to other people as well.
And Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
I think the first tip I would have is educate yourself. Know what the signs and symptoms of someone that might be struggling with their mental health, whether that's you yourself, somebody you live with, somebody you work with. Second one would be take time off the farm. I know from our research that I think is it 15% of farmers don't take any time off the farm at all and haven't done in the last month. And thirdly, look around and enjoy what you're doing. Let's start to get out of that mindset that everybody says it's bad, so it must be. Use the things, and whether or not that's mindfulness, stopping, looking around at the amazing landscape that you have the privilege to work in. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but actually understand that this is a roller coaster.
Thank you, Stephanie and Alex, for sharing your insights to help us all look after our mental health. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer-term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. If you have any questions that you would like us to ask the experts, email info@agri.co.uk. See you next time.